Hello and welcome to Rise Zion. Today I'm here again with my companion, Elder Kendall Gallardo. He's broadcasting in from Chile, and we're here talking to him about a miracle. So generally on this channel we talk about miracles that happened on the mission, but he has a miracle that actually happened in his family's past, in his family history, that he'd like to share with us today. I don't know anything about this story, so start from the beginning. What is this story? How long ago does this story take place?
Well, this story took place in 1930, about
Okay,
that time,
it's about the world wars.
almost 100 years ago,
Yeah.
here in Chile.
Okay.
It's a very interesting story, but I need to give you some context. As some of the audience may know, the church was restored in 1830,
Mhm.
or the process of restoration began at that time. And actually, the church was organized at that time. The process began
Earlier, but
before with the Revolution. But anyway, and the church began in the United States and began to spread to basically Europe at first and then to the Pacific. Elder Parley Pratt came to Chile in the 1850s, and he was here for 3 months, about 3 months, and he couldn't learn Spanish very well, so he had many difficulties to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ here, and he didn't have any materials in Spanish. The Book of Mormon wasn't at the
right.
time translated to English to Spanish. He didn't have any pamphlets. He didn't have anything. And at the time, Chile was a very young country. So there was some social unrest. So the time wasn't the right one to preach the gospel and to establish the church here. So he left. But because of some laws that were established with the time, Chile began to be a country with many liberties. One of these was the liberty of worshiping God in the way you wish. So
Mm.
new churches, besides the Catholic Church, began to establish here in Chile. So that was a really good preparation for the coming of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to the country in 1956.
Oh.
Okay, 1956, with the first missionaries that came here because of a church member that was living here at the time. He was a manager of the Kodak Eastman Company, and he was living here in Santiago. And he requested the president of the church to bring some missionaries and to start the preaching of the gospel. So President McKay visited the country and he accepted the proposal, and he sent a couple of missionaries that were serving in Argentina at the time to, to Chile to
Oh.
begin the missionary work. So the preaching began here in Santiago and then it expanded to other places of Chile. But about 30, 35 years before that event, in one place called, in one region actually called the Valparaiso, my grandmother was living there. She was about 9 or 10 years old, and she was very loved by her dad. And her dad had converted to evangelical church, and he was a very faithful member there. Because of the reality of Chile at the time, he was very unlearned. So what I understand is that he didn't know how to write, how to read, but he had a big faith in God. So my grandmother was very sick at the time. She had to be sent to another hospital very far from Viña del Mar, the city in which she was living at the time. She was sent to Quillota. And my great grandfather was always worried for her daughter and always went to the place where they were taking care of her.
Mm.
And one day he received a telegraph saying that her daughter had passed away.
Oh.
He was very sad,
Mm.
but he felt that her girl would live. So he immediately uh, went to the train station and went to the other city that is called Quillota, as I mentioned. And he went to the hospital in which the body of my grandmother was. And at first, he wasn't allowed to see the body of his daughter because she was dead, and she was in the place in which they needed to prepare her body for the bury and all kind of stuff. So the nuns that were in the hospital prohibited him to entry there.
Oh.
But he said, "No, I need to go there because I need to pray for her, and she will live." And the nuns were saying, "No, she's dead. You don't understand.
Mm.
You don't need to do anything. Sadly, she's dead." But he insisted so much that finally the nuns opened the door and let him go to the place where my grandmother was. And in that moment, when he saw her daughter, he began to pray fervently to the Lord so she may come back to life. And she woke up.
Wow.
She woke up and she healed. And between 35 and 40 years later, she, as an adult, married with some children. He, he listened to the missionaries and she was baptized
Mm.
as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And she and her husband, my grandfather, were one of the first members of the church in the city of Viña del Mar.
Oh.
And the church was still very young in that place.
Like.
And and because of that prayer of faith of my great grandfather and other miracles that happened later, I am here.
Right. Because if your grandmother had not lived, then you wouldn't be here.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's right.
That's crazy.
And yeah, and the Lord preserved
Uh,
my grandmother's life so she could be a member of the church and she could raise a family in the gospel and all that kind of things that came later.
mhm.
So I'm so grateful because because of that prayer of faith of my great grandfather. He knew only some parts of the true gospel of Jesus Christ. He didn't have everything. We have everything.
Mhm.
But with the few parts of the gospel he had, it was enough for him to know that there was a mighty God that that was able to make miracles.
Yeah.
This is a really important story to share because God is so good with people that it doesn't really matter if they have the gospel of Jesus Christ in its fullness or they have only just particles
Mhm.
or only they have faith. It doesn't really matter. God loves his children so
That's
much
right.
that if they have faith in him, they will grant them what they are requesting, if it is his will, of course. And it was his will, and that's why my grandmother lived.
That's true. We talk a lot about on this channel that God is no respecter of persons and that miracles happen in all faith traditions. And he's willing to show his mighty miracles to people of all faiths, not even Christian faiths, all faiths. Something that a question that I had as you were telling your story just now, was do you think that this miraculous experience that he was a part of, basically raising your grandmother from the dead, do you think that this prepared him in some way to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ later?
To my great grandfather,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah. How do you think
Well,
that? And
he sadly passed away before the church was in Chile.
uh-huh.
But I'm really sure that if he had heard the gospel of Jesus Christ while living in this earth, on this earth, he would accepted it immediately. And I'm pretty sure about that
Hmm,
because he loved God and he had a really great faith and he was a really good man, a
gotcha.
really good one. So when he went to the spirit world and he knew about all the things we know, I'm sure he accepted immediately. And well, he had to wait some years because the first temple in South America was dedicated in 1978.
Hmm.
So my grandmother was baptized in 1963,
Mm,
you know, and they were very poor. And although the church at the time had a fund to help people to go to the Sao Paulo temple in Brazil to receive their endowments, it wasn't possible for my grandparents to go there.
mm,
But the church built a temple in Santiago and dedicated it in 1983. So around that time, my grandparents were to the temple to receive their endowments. They were sealed. Of course, they performed the ordinances on behalf of their their ancestors, including my great grandfather,
mm.
the one of which I have been talking today.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think that, wow, what other impacts do you think that that experience had on your grandmother and your, I guess, who would eventually become your grandfather? Did Was that something that they were, constantly thinking about? And I don't know, like, did that impact their decision to join the church as well, or was it just something that was kind of in the background? Or what is your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly it impacted. They at the time of their conversion, my my grandparents, especially my granddad, were were looking for the true Church of Jesus Christ,
Interesting.
and they attended many churches. For
Mhm.
example, my granddad, when he was 12 years old, about 12 years old, here in Chile, although there was a law that allowed many churches to be established, and you were free to choose whatever church you wanted to attend, still the Catholic Church had a big influence on people. So sometimes it was very hard to do some things. For example, my granddad, I'm talking now about another part of the family,
Mhm.
you know. But my granddad, the husband of my grandmother that passed away from many hours, I
Uh-huh.
didn't I didn't tell you that she
Oh.
was dead like 6 hours, 8 hours,
Uh-huh.
a long time. It wasn't. Uh, it wasn't for 30 minutes or
Or a
1
few
hour.
seconds, yeah. It was for
Yeah,
hours.
yeah, hours, hours. I have the story somewhere, but I don't remember the exact time. But there were hours, hours.
But
She
you
passed
suspect
away
it. Yeah.
about noon, and she came back to life in the evening, almost night.
Mm.
But I'm coming back to what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
no worries.
Well, my granddad, the husband of my grandmother that came back from death, he was very very interested in religion since a very short age.
Mm.
Um, when he was 12 years old, he managed, well, he found a way to get a New Testament, a
Oh.
very small book, and he was always reading the New Testament,
Mhm.
trying to learn more about Jesus Christ. And one day he had the brilliant idea of going to a Catholic church in downtown Viña del Mar and open the New Testament and read the word of Jesus. And when a monk saw this situation, he took from him the New Testament, and said, "No, you are too young to read that."
What?
And
Huh.
yeah, that was, well, the Catholic Church at the time.
Ah. Huh.
Yeah, and what I mean with this story is that he was very interested in finding Jesus Christ and his church from a very young age. He attended many churches. He was even baptized as a Jehovah's Witness,
Oh.
and then when he joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he was excommunicated from the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, yeah. Yes, they're serious
Yeah,
about
and through a letter.
excommunication.
Yeah,
They'll
he
kick you
received a
out.
letter of excommunication. Yeah.
That's
That
true.
was very funny. But what I want to say is that both my grandpa and my grandma, from a very tender age, they they both loved the Lord, and they wanted to know more about Him, and they wanted to find the true Church of Jesus Christ. So while they were living that process, because they were people of great faith, they found the missionaries through a colleague of my grandpa. Yeah,
Mhm.
he was working in a factory, and this colleague, worked in the office, and he someday invited him to come with him to the church. My grandpa accepted immediately, and he went with his family. They were all excited,
Mhm.
and this church was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the church meetings at the time was very different.
Mhm.
Well, basically, there weren't any members in the area, so the missionaries were there with other people interested, plus a couple of members, no more than that. And the meetings were in a rented house. They put chairs in a circle. They sat in the circle, and
Mhm.
they were talking about the gospel and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But the lessons were really long.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were receiving the teachings of the missionaries for about 5 months or so. Now everything is pretty much weaker, with a couple of times attending the church plus about 5 lessons. You're ready to be baptized if you're worthy, of course.
Uh-huh.
And they were baptized, my grandparents, in a pool,
Hmm.
that was located right next to a castle that is now a museum in Viña del Mar. And in the place where that pool was located, after after that, some years later, was purchased by the church, and they began to build a beautiful chapel there.
Oh.
And my grandparents and my mom, when she was very young, were there helping with the construction.
Hmm.
In that time, the church didn't hire contractors and all kind of uh, professional people to build the chapels, because the church wasn't poor, but the church didn't have so much means as it has today.
Hmm.
So basically, the church had an architect, civil constructor, and missionaries that were directing the work, and all other kind of things were done by members.
Mhm.
So members were doing the excavation and helping with many things. So my grandparents and my mom were there, And now in that place, there's a beautiful stake center that will be demolished because in that very same place, the church will build a temple in that city.
Ah, so all these
Yeah.
years later, huh?
Uh-huh. In the very same spot where my grandparents,
We're first
including my
baptized.
grandma, that survived because because of the faith of her dad. In that very same spot, the church will build a house of the Lord.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
It's interesting to see the progression of things. So it's like they were one of the first members in that area. And it's like they are able to see, the progression of the church in the entire area, from building, the stake center and then finally a temple. Hmm.
Hmm.
All in
Yeah.
that same area.
Hmm.
Wow.
And that temple will be the biggest of the country.
Wow. A
Yeah.
lot of people will go there. And it's still by a
Hmm.
castle?
I'm sorry?
It's still by a castle, or is the castle still there? Wow, so we're gonna
Yeah.
have like a castle here, and then we're gonna have the temple right next to it.
Uh-huh.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a beautiful castle. It is a Chilean one, so it is small,
Yeah,
but it's beautiful. It's
yeah.
beautiful. And well, I'm so grateful, as I told you before, for the faith that my great grandfather had.
Hmm.
Because of that faith, my grandmother had faith. So when she found the church, she immediately recognized it.
Hmm.
And because of that faith, my mom had faith. She served a mission, she married in the temple, and because of her faith, I have faith.
Mm.
And I hope someday I can have descendants that can have that kind of faith too.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's a
Mm.
really good story. I definitely appreciate you sharing that. Is there any other comments that you'd like to make about that?
There's another miracle of my grandmom too.
Uh-huh.
When she was, I think, 30 years old, she had an infection in one of her lungs.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was about 10 years before she was baptized.
Okay.
Okay. And well, at the time, medicine in the world, and especially here in Chile, that was a very poor country at the time, was very undeveloped. So most of the people that had that kind of infection died.
Hmm.
But she began to receive treatment, and doctors could remove her lung, and she was one of the first three people in the country that received plastic lung. Well, it's not plastic, actually, it is another word I'm looking for. It was made of rubber, basically. You know,
Okay.
it was a lung made of rubber. She began to receive a treatment so her body may accept the new lung, and she was in the hospital for 9 months.
Oh wow.
That was a long time. And the other people that received the new lung passed away,
Yeah, that would be
but
very scary.
she survived.
Hmm.
She was the only one that survived the operation, the surgery at the time. And she recovered. She had some more kids,
Hmm.
including my mom, that was born like 5 years later, that experience. And a couple of years later, my mom's birth, the family joined the Church of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So there were two occasions in which my mother had to, well, was almost destroyed.
Right, was never born, right?
Because, yeah, it looks like someone or something knew what was ahead for her and wanted to destroy her, but it couldn't.
Right. Hmm. Well,
It couldn't.
that would be so scary going through a new operation like that with
Mm,
something new like that that probably had such a high mortality rate at the time.
yeah. And my grandpa's friends were telling him to leave my grandma
Oh.
and to look for another wife.
Oh dear. No.
But he he loved her so much that he finally, well, he decided to stay.
Yeah.
And it was a really hard time because there were many months in which he had to work by night
Mm.
in a big factory, and he had to be with his children in the day and take care of them, and also visit his wife in the hospital,
Mm.
and everything by bike or by feet.
Right.
Very, yeah, a very tough moment for the family. But love was much stronger than any other influence, than any other thought. And of course, their faith in God allowed them to resist this very hard time.
Mm. The opposition was so strong in different ways, it seemed like the social pressure. That's so odd to me that yeah, wow, that's interesting. Very interesting. We have talked about opposition in the past in this channel, but in other episodes, but sometimes it does seem like there is a plan and that the adversary is trying to thwart that plan, right? And we can see it when we look back and kind of replay the moments in our life, and then we can see where God overcomes that thing, overcomes
Mm,
that opposition through love, like the good choices that your grandfather made, because otherwise you wouldn't have been born either if he had decided to just leave.
uh-huh.
So that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that my grandparents, my great grandparents too, had that kind of faith
Hmm.
and that kind of um, confidence in God's plan, although they didn't knew so much about that.
Hmm.
You know, they had parts of the truth. They had only the Bible and a limited understanding of it. But this is a very remarkable story for me because, as I mentioned, it it teaches me and it reminds me too that faith, well, that is why faith is the first principle of the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you don't have faith, it doesn't really matter what you do later,
Hmm.
because faith is what finally will help you to overcome all kind of situations, all kind of problems. Faith is what will make to happen miracles in your lives. Everything begins with faith, but faith in Jesus Christ, of course,
Hmm.
not faith in humanity or in technology or whatever.
Yeah. And it's it's like faith in the future too. In your case, it's like your family didn't know it was going to happen in the future, right? It's only looking back now that you can see the full picture. And the faith made it, got them through all of this difficulty, but now you have the opportunity to look back and see without faith, like how everything is. I don't know if that makes sense, but you have the opportunity to look back and see how their faith affected the future or your present.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool.
My grandma's ancestors were really good people.
Hmm.
I have felt that many times, and I have felt that now they are happy with the gospel of Jesus Christ in the other side.
Right, because they've passed away since.
Yeah, and no, I mean my ancestors, her ancestors,
Uh-huh.
you know, not talking about her specifically.
But
I
her
mean
side of the
her
family.
parents, her grandparents, and other people from the past.
Uh-huh.
That is a very powerful teaching for me because now I understand why she had a lot of faith because her ancestors were ready to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ if they had the opportunity to accept it. But the gospel wasn't present here in Chile at the time, but I'm sure they are happy with the gospel in the other side of the veil. I know that they are happy. And I am grateful because of their faith,
Mm.
because their faith uh, has allowed me to be here today.
Hmm.
It has been, you know, as I mentioned before, because of the faith of someone, other people had faith.
Hmm.
In this case, my my grandparent, my great grandparents, my great great grandparents had faith, and that's why my grandma had faith, and that's why my mom has faith, and that's why I have faith.
Hmm.
So, good things we do have a huge impact, not only in our lives, but in the future generations.
Mm.
So, that's one of the messages I will love
For sure.
to share and make very clear.
Yeah. And
When you make decisions, remember that everything you're doing will affect not only your own life, but the lives of many people that will come after you.
mm, that is so true. I think that that is so important today. It seems like there's a lot of pressure in our world today to not, you know, start families and to, even with the abortion issue, you know, it's very, very sad that people are choosing not to start families and to progress. Well, I mean, and there's obviously, you know, difficulties that we all face in life, and you know, not to judge people for, you know, the choices that they have to make, but nonetheless it seems like there is a lot of pressure in today's society not to move forward in faith and to have families, and it does seem like an attack on the family by the adversary. And just looking at your story, it really illustrates that the gospel of Jesus Christ is a gospel of eternal life, of eternal progression that affects so many generations behind us and in front of us. And yeah, that's a really good story. I really appreciate you sharing that because I think that's so important in our culture to talk about. So we need to change our culture and make it into a culture that appreciates legacy and appreciates our past as well as our future. So yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, you
I
bet.
I didn't have in my mind to share this very special experience,
Mm,
but I felt that it was the right time, the right thing to do, and I appreciate a lot that I have this space to share with your
cool.
audience this very sacred experience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we don't have much of an audience yet, but but yes, I am hoping to grow this channel and to make it a place where people can share their sacred experiences. You know, there is a prominent YouTuber named John DeLynn, and he is anti-church material. When he first started, he called his channel to this day is called Mormon Stories, right? And he tricked people into believing that it was a place where people, that's what I thought. I thought it was a place where faithful members of the church would go and share stories, right? But that's not what it was. It was a trick, and he got people to come on the show. I mean, occasionally he might have actual members of the church on, but for the most part, it is a channel that sows seeds of doubt. And that's what the purpose of his channel is. But I want my channel to be a place where people can come and share their stories from actual members of the church, from people who have actual faith. And so I thank you for coming on and sharing your miracles. And for anybody out there who has a miracle to share, I ask that you also come on the show and share your experiences with us. In the description, I'm going to leave a link where you can click and fill out the form. Make sure you do that if you have a story, and then I'll reach out and talk, and we can see if you want to be on our show. Thank you for watching Rise Zion. Before you go, I have an important ask. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Our goal is to help fortify people's faith by providing some empirical evidence of God's hand in their life. However, if people can't find our videos or our channel, then our mission isn't accomplished. By liking and subscribing, you'll be helping us in this important mission. Thank you again, and until next time, bye.